Imagine this scene. You're standing in a supermarket in Buenos Aires, aisle 4. Fluorescent lights humming. In your basket, a carton of milk, a bag of pasta, a cheap bottle of cooking oil. Nothing extravagant. You glance at the price tag on the milk, 500 pesos. You hesitate for a second, doing the mental math you've learned to do since childhood. And while you're standing there, frozen between shelves, an employee walks past. He peels the sticker off, slaps on a new one. 600 pesos. Not tomorrow. It's not next week. Now your heart speeds up, not because you're surprised, but because you're trained. You know the rule. If the checkout line is long, if the cashier is slow, your salary might lose 5% of its value before you even tap your card. You rush to the register like you're escaping a fire. Because in Argentina, money doesn't melt slowly, it evaporates. This isn't dystopian fiction. This isn't a thought experiment from an economics textbook. This was daily life. Welcome to the world's most chaotic, fascinating, and terrifying financial laboratory. A country that has defaulted on its debt 9 times. It's a country that once burned through 5 presidents in 2 weeks. A country that went from being richer than France and Germany to becoming a permanent case study in economic failure. If you want to understand how the global economy really works, or more accurately, how it breaks, you don't start on Wall Street. You start here, in Argentina. Because every bad idea in macroeconomics has been tested here, repeatedly, at full scale, on real people, debt addiction, currency, delusion, populism versus austerity, money printing versus social collapse. Argentina didn't just experience these things, lived inside them. But here's the uncomfortable truth. Argentina didn't start poor. Argentina didn't start broken. Argentina didn't start corrupt. It started rich. So rich that once upon a time, rich as an Argentine was a phrase whispered in European cafes, and it wasn't sarcasm. To understand the madness, we have to rewind. Far back. Before the chaos, before the defaults, before the peso became a punchline. We have to go back to the mirage, the golden mirage. When Argentina was the future, it's 1913. You're walking down the streets of Paris. Belle Epoque, electric lights, cafes buzzing with optimism. And you overhear a waiter talking about a customer who just tipped with a gold coin. He shakes his head and mutters, "Rich calm, an Argentine." Rich as an Argentine. At the start of the 20th century, Argentina wasn't just doing well, it was an economic titan. Top 10 GDP per capita in the world, ahead of Canada, ahead of Australia, ahead of Italy, neck and neck with the United States. This wasn't hype, it was math. The British Empire was industrializing at full speed and needed food, and Argentina had it. Endless flatland, pampas, perfect soil for wheat, millions of cattle. And then came the technological breakthrough that changed everything. Refrigerated shipping. For the first time, beef could cross the Atlantic without rotting. Argentine meat flooded Europe. Money followed. Immigrants followed. Italians, Spaniards, Germans, French, Buenos Aires transformed into a city that looked like it was built for an empire that hadn't officially declared itself yet. Wide boulevards, opera houses, French architecture. Even today, the city feels like a memory of a future that never arrived. But beneath the elegance, something was missing. Argentina wasn't building a diversified industrial engine like the United States. It wasn't inventing machines or dominating manufacturing. It was extracting and exporting. Cows and wheat. Commodities. As long as the world was hungry, the model worked. When the world stopped buying, it collapsed. And that moment arrived in 1929. 1929, when the music stopped, the Great Depression didn't just crash stock markets. It shattered global trade. Suddenly, nobody wanted Argentine beef. Nobody wanted wheat. The cash faucet turned off. And this is where Argentina made a mistake that would echo for a century. Instead of restructuring its economy, instead of building long-term institutions, the country fell into political chaos. Between 1930 and 1983, Argentina experienced 6 military coups. 6. Imagine living in a country where you don't check the weather forecast. You check whether the army is still in the barracks. This instability poisoned everything. No one plans 20 years ahead when they don't know who will be president next Tuesday. Infrastructure suffers. Institutions rot. Trust disappears. But worse than instability was psychology. Argentina's early wealth created a standard of living the country felt entitled to forever, even after the money disappeared. The cafes, European lifestyle, the middle-class comfort. And when reality could no longer support that lifestyle, Argentina faced a choice: cut back and accept decline, or maintain the illusion. Argentina chose illusion. And when illusions get expensive, there is only one tool left: print. The birth of short-termism this period planted Argentina's fatal flaw: short-termism. Every government, civilian or military, faced the same pressure. Keep people happy now. Don't think about 10 years from now. Don't think about debt. Don't think about inflation. Just survive the present. This is how nations slide into addiction. Not to drugs, to easy money. Once you start printing to fund lifestyles you can't afford, stopping feels like death. Every pause hurts. Every cut sparks unrest. Every reform feels like betrayal. This is the trap Argentina walked into decades before hyperinflation made headlines. By the time Juan Domingo Perón arrived in the 1940s, the foundation was already cracked. He didn't invent the disease, he weaponized it. And from that moment on, Argentina's economy stopped being a system designed for growth and became a pendulum, swinging between pleasure and pain, between generosity and austerity, between illusion and collapse. In the next section, we meet the man who defined that pendulum and the moment Argentina learned that you cannot vote prosperity into existence. If Argentina were a novel, this is where the main character enters the story. The year is 1945. The world is coming out of war. Factories are humming again. And Argentina steps onto the stage with a man who would define its economic psychology for generations. Juan Domingo Perón in Argentina. Mentioning his name is like striking a match in a room filled with gas. There is no neutrality. You either revere him as the father of social justice or curse him as the architect of decline. Entire families have been split along Peronist fault lines. But love him or hate him, Perón understood something deeply important. The so-called Golden Age had never included everyone. The working class, factory workers, dockhands, rural laborers had watched the wealth pass them by. Beef exports built opera houses, not pensions. So Perón made a deal with the masses. Higher wages, strong unions, paid vacations, nationalized railways, utilities, and key industries. Dignity, finally, for people who had never tasted it. And for a while, it worked. The economy felt alive. Money circulated. Workers consumed. The state looked powerful. Argentina felt sovereign. But economics doesn't care about feelings. It cares about math. And the math didn't add up. The pendulum is born to fund this expanded state. Argentina spent far more than it earned. Taxes weren't enough. Exports were volatile. So the government leaned on the same tool it always had: printing. This created the pendulum. Swing left, populist governments spend aggressively. Wages rise, subsidies expand. People feel richer. Then inflation accelerates. Savings evaporate. Imports explode. Reserves disappear. Swing right, austerity governments or military regimes step in. Spending is slashed. Currency is stabilized. Then poverty spikes. Unemployment rises. Anger explodes. And the people vote the populists back in. Repeat again and again. This cycle didn't just damage the economy. It destroyed trust. People stopped believing in institutions, stopped believing in long-term plans, stopped believing that saving money made sense. And this psychological shift would prove far more destructive than any single policy. 1989, when money died, every addiction has a rock bottom. For Argentina, it was 1989. The economy didn't just break, it disintegrated. Monthly inflation hit 197%. Annual inflation crossed 3,000%. To understand what that means, forget graphs. Picture this instead. A man walks into a bar and orders a beer. 10 Australs, the bartender says. He drinks it, orders another. 15 Australs. The man protests. But it was 10. The bartender shrugs. That was 10 minutes ago. This wasn't a joke. This was normal life. People got paid and immediately ran to supermarkets, not to shop, but to convert salary into objects. Canned food, toilet paper, oil, anything that wouldn't lose value by sunset. Saving died. The idea of planning died. And a new national instinct was born. Never trust your own currency. From this moment forward, Argentina developed a parallel religion, the US dollar. Not as ideology, as survival. This trauma explains everything that comes later. Why taxi drivers quote exchange rates. Why landlords demand rent in cash dollars. Why entire apartments are bought brick by brick instead of saved peso by peso. 1989 burned this lesson into the Argentine psyche. Money issued by your government can betray you overnight. And once a society learns that lesson, it never unlearns it. The illusion solution after 1989, Argentina was desperate. Inflation had destroyed credibility. The state was broke. People were furious. So policymakers reached for something radical. Not reform, not discipline, but a promise so bold it felt like magic. Tie the peso to the dollar, forever. In the next section, we enter the most seductive illusion Argentina has ever lived inside a decade, where everyone felt rich, flew to Miami, drank champagne with pizza, and quietly sold the future to pay for the present. If hyperinflation was Argentina's hell, then the 1990s felt like heaven. And that's what made it so dangerous. After the chaos of 1989, Argentina did something that looked insane, but felt brilliant. It took the printing press, locked it in a vault, and threw away the key. The rule was simple, brutal, elegant. 1 peso equals 1 US dollar. By law, not a target, not a guideline. A legal promise. If the central bank wanted to print 1 peso, it had to hold 1 real US dollar in reserve. No exceptions, no creativity. No political shortcuts. This was the convertibility plan designed by Economy Minister Domingo Cavallo under President Carlos Menem. And almost overnight, inflation died. Not slowed, managed, killed. For a society traumatized by money that melted in your hands, this felt like salvation. The high of stability suddenly, prices stopped changing every hour. Salaries meant something again. People could plan, could save, could breathe. And then something even more intoxicating happened. Argentines felt rich. Really rich. A TV in Miami cost $300. In Argentina, that was 300 pesos. So people flew to Miami. Flights were packed. Suitcases were empty, going north, and overflowing coming back. Microwaves, VCRs, designer clothes, electronics, 2 of everything. They called it the era of pizza, with champagne, cheap food, luxury drinks, and the feeling that Argentina had finally joined the first world. The International Monetary Fund applauded. Foreign investors poured in. Argentina became the model student. But here's the rule of illusions. If something feels too good, you're probably not paying the real price yet. What the peg was hiding, the peso-dollar peg, fixed inflation. But it broke something else. Competitiveness. If 1 peso equals $1, Argentine labor costs are effectively American. But Argentina wasn't America. It didn't have Silicon Valley. It didn't have advanced manufacturing. It had factories competing with Brazil, Asia, and Eastern Europe. And Brazil did something Argentina couldn't. Brazil devalued. Suddenly, Brazilian shoes were cheaper. Brazilian cars were cheaper. Brazilian factories survived. Argentine factories died. Imports flooded in. Local industry collapsed. Unemployment crept upward. But the illusion had to be maintained. So how did the government keep the lights on while the economy weakened? Debt, borrowing in dollars to defend a currency that pretended Argentina was as productive as the United States. They privatized everything. Airlines, oil, telecoms, utilities. It was like selling the furniture to pay the mortgage. It works once. By the late 1990s, the debt pile was massive. Growth slowed, confidence cracked, and then the truth arrived. 2001, the moment trust died. December 2001 is burned into Argentina's collective memory. The government saw the numbers. Dollar reserves were disappearing. If people rushed the banks, the system would collapse. So they panicked. On a Saturday night, the economy minister went on television and announced the corralito. The little corral. You could only withdraw a tiny amount of your own money each week, about $250. The rest, locked. Savings, business accounts, retirement funds, trapped, and rumors spread fast. That dollar accounts would be forcibly converted into pesos. That the peg was ending. That everything was about to implode. This shattered the last thing holding society together, trust. People didn't just protest, they erupted. Middle-class families poured into the streets banging pots and pans. The Cacerolazo supermarkets were looted. Police fired rubber bullets, then real ones. 39 people died. On December 20th, President De La Rua fled the presidential palace by helicopter, lifting off the roof as crowds surged below. In 2 weeks, Argentina burned through 5 presidents, and then came the final betrayal. The peg was abandoned. The peso collapsed. $100 in the bank became 100 pesos, worth about $25. 75% of savings erased in a blink. Poverty exploded past 50%. Children fainted in schools. In the land of beef and wheat, hunger returned. This was rock bottom. And logic says this should have been the end of illusions. But Argentina wasn't finished experimenting. In the next section, the pendulum swings again, fueled by soybeans, statistical lies, and the belief that if reality is inconvenient, you can just rewrite it. After 2001, Argentina should not have survived. By every rule of macroeconomics, the country was finished, defaulted, discredited, cut off from global capital markets. Its currency shattered, its institutions exposed as fragile theater. And yet, it lived. Not because it fixed the underlying disease, but because history handed it a miracle. China got hungry. The soy windfall in the early 2000s, the global economy entered a commodity supercycle. China's rapid industrialization sent demand for food and raw materials through the roof. And Argentina just happened to be one of the world's largest soybean producers. Soy prices exploded. Dollars flowed in again, and Argentina breathed. This was the era of Nestor Kirchner, followed by Cristina Fernandez de Kirchner. Growth surged, 8, sometimes 9% per year. The crisis felt like a bad dream. But here is where Argentina revealed its deepest habit. Instead of saving the windfall, instead of building reserves, diversifying industry, or preparing for the next downturn, the government spent everything. Subsidies everywhere. Electricity, nearly free. Transport, nearly free. Water, gas, energy, disconnected from reality. People in Buenos Aires paid electricity bills that wouldn't cover a single light bulb in Europe. Air conditioners ran with windows open. Infrastructure quietly rotted. The logic was emotional, not economic. If the money is here, use it now, because tomorrow is uncertain. When reality returned by the late 2000s, inflation crept back. Not violently at first, quietly, insidiously. So the government faced a choice. Admit inflation was rising and lose political control, or deny reality. They chose denial. The National Statistics Institute, INDEC, was intervened. Economists were removed. Data was massaged. Official inflation numbers stopped matching supermarket prices. 25% inflation became 9% on paper. 30% became 11%. Argentina invented something rare in economics: state-sponsored fiction. Private economists who published real inflation estimates were harassed. Companies were pressured to freeze prices. Even McDonald's was forced to manipulate the Big Mac index. The Big Mac stayed cheap, but disappeared from the menu. You had to ask for it quietly. Truth became flexible. And when truth bends long enough, trust breaks again. A country with many dollars by the 2010s, Argentines stopped believing in official numbers entirely. They believed only what they could see. So when the government restricted access to US dollars, limiting people to buying just $200 per month, the black market exploded. Enter the blue dollar. Walk down Cale, Florida, in Buenos Aires, and you'll hear it. Cambio, cambio, cambio. Unofficial exchangers are bolitos, little trees guiding you to hidden offices behind kiosks and jewelry stores. Everyone uses them: workers, businesses, police, politicians. The economy fractured into a multiverse. Official dollar, blue dollar, tourist dollar, Qatar dollar, Netflix dollar, Coldplay dollar, wine export dollar. At one point, there were more than 15 exchange rates. Running a business became an exercise in survival math. Which rate applies today? Which one tomorrow? What is a peso even worth? By 2023, inflation surged past 140%. Poverty crossed 40%. Central bank reserves went negative, meaning the bank was spending money it didn't have. Argentina wasn't managing an economy anymore. It was improvising. The chainsaw moment, and then something snapped. In moments of total exhaustion, societies don't choose moderation. They choose extremes. Argentina chose a chainsaw. Javier Milei stormed into power in late 2023, loud, radical, openly hostile to the political class. He didn't promise comfort. He promised pain. No hay plata. There is no money. He slashed ministries, killed subsidies, devalued the peso overnight, stopped public works cold. And for the first time in years, the government ran a fiscal surplus. Markets cheered. Inflation slowed. But the social cost was immediate. Utility bills exploded. Consumption collapsed. Recession deepened. Argentina now stands on a knife's edge. Can austerity fix decades of addiction before society breaks? Can discipline restore trust faster than poverty destroys patience? That's the experiment running right now, and it matters far beyond Argentina. Because many countries are quietly drifting toward the same edge. Which brings us to the final question. Not just about Argentina, but about the global economy itself. So what is the real truth about Argentina's economy? It's easy to look at the numbers and see only failure. Defaults, inflation charts that look like heart attacks. Political chaos. Currency jokes. Another crisis, another reset, another promise that this time will be different. But that reading misses something essential. If you walk the streets of Buenos Aires today, you don't see a defeated society. You see cafes packed at midnight. You see theaters full. You see people laughing, arguing, adapting. Argentina has survived things that would have shattered most countries. Hyperinflation, dictatorships, debt seizures, currency confiscation, social collapse. And out of that, it developed something rare: adaptability. An Argentine 20-year-old often has more practical financial literacy than a 50-year-old Wall Street banker. Not because they studied it, because they were forced to live it. They know how to hedge, how to pivot, how to survive when rules change overnight. This is why Argentina is the world's greatest financial laboratory, because it proves two uncomfortable truths at the same time. First, bad policy can destroy even the richest land. Resources don't save you. Culture doesn't save you. Early wealth doesn't save you. If institutions rot and incentives reward illusion over productivity, decline becomes structural. Second, societies are harder to kill than spreadsheets suggest. People adapt. Informal systems emerge. Parallel economies form. Life continues. Argentina shows us what happens when a nation lives too long on borrowed time, financially, politically, psychologically. Every pendulum swing taught the same lesson and ignored it again. Print now, pay later. Spend today, regret tomorrow. Deny reality, then punish it when it returns. Right now, Argentina stands in yet another experiment. The chainsaw plan might work. It might fail spectacularly. It might simply set up the next swing. No one knows. But if you want a glimpse of the future of the global economy, rising debt, polarized politics, distrust in institutions, currency, fear, you don't need a crystal ball. You watch Argentina because it is living tomorrow, today. The question isn't whether Argentina will survive. It always does. The question is whether the world will learn from it or repeat the experiment at a much larger scale. And that's what makes this country so dangerous and so fascinating.